Politics has long been a recurring hot topic in America. Recently, I've observed that politics seems to have grown with more intensity, causing political polarization within the two-partisan system and tension between friends, families, and communities. The list of perceived deviants within the two parties seems to grow each year. With interviews and research, I want to discover the perceived deviance people hold for politics within the two-partisan system. In recent years, studies show that ideological thinking is now much more closely aligned with partisanship, doubling over the past 2 decades. Due to this, there is much less ideological overlap, which may cause larger differences in communal and moral standpoints. As we can see in the study by PEW Research from 1994 to 2014, the separation in ideological thinking has continued to grow, growing even more in recent years. We can see this trend through watching as the purple overlap continues to diminish, while the blue and red of the left and right party continues to grow. Looking at our next statistic, we can see how difference in community type has rendered a large difference in voting preferences. In the top half, we can see a growing number of urban communities from 1998 to 2017 voting Democratic, and suburban communities pretty split across the board, with rural communities voting largely Republican. As we can see in recent years, these lines have continued to spread apart, showing the difference communities now have in political and ideological standpoints. This growing separation can be seen within many different communities. For instance, referencing my own personal experience, I grew up in a particularly right-wing community full of farmers and ranchers in eastern Oregon called Pallet Rock. Once I moved to Boise, the community dynamic switched, with most people who outwardly spoke about politics being left-wing. You can see the divide within these two communities' behaviors towards each other. Pilot Rock perceived those from the city as all liberals, who were brainwashed and immoral, while the Boise community viewed Republicans as uneducated and also immoral. This goes to show that communities have continually grown in recent years in their political divides, thus creating larger quantities of perceived deviance towards opposing parties. So, what might be some of the causes of these separating political standpoints? We speak with Gordon Larson to delve more into this from his personal wide array of experience.
I'll kind of give you a short bio of my background. We'll start with what's contemporary. So currently, I work for the Grant Education Service District as a school safety prevention specialist, which is an overseer of the programs dealing with school culture, suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, safety issues within the school to include cyberbullying, bullying, and those types of issues. And then I coordinate training for administrators, counselors, and teachers to help them be aware of those issues as they arise in school so that they can be better adept at handling them, as well as a sexual incident response team that does the same thing but deals with sexual incidents within the schools. So that's kind of my current job. I've done that for about a year. Prior to that, I served in a variety of consulting roles. I taught constitutional law to police officers, judges, and attorneys. I did that for a number of years, as well as I was a consultant and I guess deemed an expert on anti-government extremism. So I spoke to varying groups on issues such as extremism, both on the left and the right. And many moons ago, I served as a detective. I was undercover detective assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. I was an Oregon Army National Guard, I guess, soldier. And prior to that, I was worked at Freightliner when I was in high school and college, building trucks. So that kind of is a summary of my background. It's pretty varied. Yes, I've seen a growing political divide in contrast to my short life. I'm 60 years old, and so I've seen political divisiveness in a variety of capacities. To give you an example, when I was a young person in 1964, of course, you're familiar with the Civil Rights Act and those issues that were occurring during the Vietnam War. I can remember seeing those very early in my childhood through this, late through the 60s and all the way through the mid 70s. And then, of course, there was, much political unrest associated with, President Nixon and him resigning the office of the presidency. More recently, I should tell you that I was one of my roles as an undercover officer was going undercover in a college, Portland State University, to be specific. So I did that, and that was on a largely a political case when Dan Quayle and President Bush were visiting Portland to determine at that point to determine if there was any groups that were planning violence and political unrest. So I've had a little bit of experience, a little bit of depth in that. Additionally, I've served in elected roles for a number of years as a school board chairman and as a candidate for different offices. So to answer your question, I'm going to circle back to I see a great deal of divisiveness. Yeah, I think our country is probably more polarized than it has been in my lifetime. I'm a history buff, so I don't know that it's at its greatest height, but it's darn close. There's a couple things going on that I think have really changed the face of politics. One is social media and the onset of so much of a 24-hour news cycle that we're constantly immersed in it. I think that's a big piece of it. So I think that taken we've left books aside. So people, if you look at some of the statistics on like Barnes and Noble or History, any of these bookstores, you'll see that those the you know the take a look at those history books and the books that are being purchased. You're going to notice, and we could attribute some of that sort of audio tape and audio books, but I mean the reality is that there's not as much reading, and consumers are getting their news from everything from Discord and Facebook and Snapchat, and they're constantly barraged by that. And unless they've taken the time to really build up some resiliency to that, they can certainly find themselves in an echo chamber. Yeah, and the social media allows us to, I guess, group together in our cohorts or our identified groups and wear the mask of I guess, social media where we can just make take random shots and we're linked together with those groups in a social media platform. It allows easy access 24/7 to that group. And then once we're in that friend group, oftentimes we don't seek any information outside that friend group because we lack either the discipline to do it or we lack the desire. I think for older folks, it's discipline and desire. For young people, I think it has to be the desire. They want to be around people that agree with them. So I think we have the mask of social media that allows them to be, rude and mean spirited and say something to you that you and I probably both agree they would be reluctant to say to your face. Now, I've been the victim of political violence in a major way. And I can tell you, in a rural community, it shocks you when it happens. But today, I think we would be misinformed if we thought that this hadn't happened. Misinformation and those things are unique to America today. I think that there's a higher level today of people being disingenuous than there ever has been. So I'll give you an example of that. Is today people will talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they have oftentimes no desire for inclusion. If you really have the desire for inclusion, then you should be willing to meet with somebody with a diverse range of ideas and have that discussion. But when we go into social media, we're not really allowing for inclusion. We don't see, and you can talk about the major news networks, or you can talk about a variety of things, but there's a lack of inclusion. So while there is some truth that diversity and inclusion does build strength, the people that oftentimes preach tolerance are the most intolerant. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience, and that intolerance has led to what I think is um, as much as you may paint it as a cultural war. I see it more as a class war, that there's a certain arrogance or elitism associated with people that believe they're in the right and that they have their leaders, and that society, because they're blessed or gifted with a certain degree of intelligence, or they've been gifted with leadership or the ability to influence others, that they feel that their opinion becomes more valid, and that it's silly that people won't listen to them. And I think that inability to talk to those people and to listen to what their concerns are demonstrates an incredible arrogance and intolerance that we should all be certainly not only aware of, but try to avoid. You need to listen to people. Their vote counts just as much as yours. I think that today it's not only the inability to have a discourse. It's probably, I think, the greatest thing I've ever, one of the the terrible things that I've seen happen is cancel culture. And so today, rather than recognize the value of the human that we're having the conversation with, and valuing them and valuing their insights and their um, thought process, we don't want to just not agree with them and then step outside that sphere of politics into the personal role. We want to harm them in many cases. We want to damage them, damage their party, damage their business, damage their family. And I think that therein lies the danger with the political. What I see today as the greatest political danger. You land on the left side of the coin or the right side of the coin. If it's a reasonable position to be in, I think that's I think that we should respect that. From my perspective, I have multiple friends on both the left and the right. Some on the not too much the extremism. I don't tolerate extremism much, but I have great friends who are many of them PhDs, dozens who are PhDs and have taught at some of the best universities in the world who are extremely who are far left from my position. But we don't we when we get together, those are cast aside and we focus on our interpersonal relationships and the things that we find uniquely charming about each other, about our lives, about our spouses, about our kids. And if we want to get into the discourse of politics, we can do that over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. And you know what? In the morning, none of us hold each other in lower regard than we did previously. And I think that's going to be the key to establishing a much more cordial discourse in the coming years. I hope we can achieve that by not immersing ourselves 24/7 in social media and in news.
Thanks to Gordon, we now understand more of the factors that are separating our political parties. Understanding this separation, we can now look into how each party perceives the other as deviant. I looked specifically on TikTok to capture some unfiltered reactions of differing parties.
Part of the problem with insane conservatives today is that they are genuinely stupid, and you cannot have an actual intelligent conversation with stupid people.
If I could ever date someone with different political views than mine, and even like 5 years ago, I would say maybe if we could compromise on different things, agree to disagree. But honestly, nowadays, with everything that's going on in the world, I actually don't know how you could.
Oh, and another thing. Me and you will never be friends if you're voting for Donald Trump. Me and you will never remain friends if you're voting for Donald Trump. It's not a political difference. This is not the 2012, 2004 elections where we just disagree on how the economy should be ran. This is my life. If you are willing to vote for someone who gets to determine whether I live or die if I have complications when I have a child, you will never sit in the presence of me. I had to cut off one of my closest friends because of this election.
As we can see from TikTok, people are unwilling to date or even be friends with people of the opposing political party. We can see that they viewed each other as unintelligent, unsafe, and immoral. It was challenging to find many Republican voices on TikTok, so I looked at Daily Wire, an extremely Republican platform, to observe how they viewed the opposing party.
Whole group of Americans that are truly so unstable, that have been lied to for so long that they have literally cracked and they can't function. And to me, that is truly sad, and I pity these people, and it is indicative of true brokenness in our society.
Of spiteful, miserable solitude. Be our guest. I think it's worth saying, anyway, that these women have serious personal issues. Leftism for them is not really an ideology or a political position. This is an expression of their own disturbed emotional and mental states. That's why they're shaving their heads and screaming in their cars and pledging to be alone for the rest of their lives. Politics doesn't have that effect on people. It's not normal to react that way to a presidential election.
As we can see from the Daily Wire, they view much of the Democrats as extremely emotional, unstable, and unhappy, similar yet different in some instances in how they view the opposing party as deviant. To sum up these perceptions of deviance, I have a chart from 2016 to 2022 that shows the qualities each party believes the other has. As we can see, Democrats highly believe Republicans are close-minded, unintelligent, and dishonest. Republicans, in turn, view Democrats as largely lazy, immoral, and dishonest. Some of these qualities they both voted for are nearly 50-50 even across the board, showing how negatively we view each other within the two-partisan system. So what can we do about it? I agree with Gordon. I think we need to continue to expose ourselves to others' political views in a peaceful manner and question what really does line up with our moral values and beliefs. And instead of hating those with opposing views, we should instead try to understand them as a person, not only for their political party.